Hello there everybody, Sam Strange here, welcome back to the Railway and welcome to another review. This time a review with a bit of a difference because for the first time ever I'm actually going to be reviewing a controller. Now, in my entire lifetime as a Hornby enthusiast, if you want to call me such, Hornby have never released a brand new analog controller. And in fact, my entire time in the hobby has been under the reign of these things. These are the old-fashioned, well, not that old-fashioned, but you know, these have been the controller, the train set controller for the last at least 10 years or so, I would guess. And I personally have never known any other. If you wanted a cheap Hornby controller, this was the one to go for. However, over recent times, in fact over this past week, Hornby have brought out a brand new controller and it is this one. It's been completely redesigned and it's now here with us. Now, the first interesting thing to note about this brand new controller is the price. They are very, very, very unbelievably cheap. On Hornby's website, so the RRP, the price is £15.99. I'm just double check that that's right because that's unbelievable. It is £15.99. Very, very little. And in fact, Hattons are selling them for even less. It's a couple of pounds less than that. So for a little over 10 quid, you get a brand new controller. It's unbelievable. And if you want to pick one of those up, Hattons are taking pre-orders, so I've included a link for you. However, there is quite a good reason for that low price, and this might surprise you. In fact, you might be wondering why the box is so incredibly tiny. Well, the reason is that this comes with no power supply. There's no wall transformer with this, which of course explains why it's so very cheap. So I knew this didn't come with a transformer, and that's okay because I've got lots of them, having reviewed lots of train sets before, and it said so on Hatton's website. It said this requires such and such transformer. However, on the Hornby website, looking at this product, I mean, please correct me if I'm wrong, but it doesn't say anywhere at the time of filming that this does not come with a transformer and that you require one. So that's a little bit naughty. In fact, I'm struggling to believe that they haven't declared that on their website. That seems really, really bizarre. Now, I'm really hoping that that isn't a deliberate naughty marketing tactic to make people buy this thinking it's a cheap controller and then to sort of lead them into the trap, really, of then realising that you've got to buy the power supply, which is more expensive than the controller itself. The Hornby one is £21.99, I think it was. Again, let me double check the price because I can't get these things wrong. £21.99. So in fact, if you need to buy both, it costs £37. So I don't know why Hornby would do that other than, of course, to just make the controller seem cheap when it's not. Now, obviously, some people will already have the existing controller, and by the way, the two will use the same power supply. So it's possible that people that are looking to upgrade maybe will have a power supply lying around. But to me, it still seems pretty odd that they would package this as standard without a transformer, because people that are in the market for a brand new controller that is the full package that they can just set up and get on with straight away aren't going to want to buy this because it's not complete. So why they didn't have two separate versions, maybe one with a power supply, I don't know. Maybe they will do that, I don't know. But one thing is for sure, those that buy this on Hornby's website and don't realise that it doesn't come with a transformer might be a little bit cross. So I don't know why they've done that. As I say, I hope to goodness that it's an honest mistake, but I think they ought to correct it because trading standards might have something to say, mightn't they? Not that I'm going to report them or something, but yeah, it seems a bit naughty. And of course, the other thing I massively enjoyed on Hornby's website, it says the colour and contents of the products may vary. In other words, there could be literally anything inside this box. So we might be getting a year's supply of used tissues, we might be getting a boiled egg. At the moment, who the hell knows, it could be anything. But yeah, hopefully it will be the controller. So, interesting, very interesting. It's been redesigned, it looks good, I must say. And so what I'm going to do today is I'm going to unbox it, I'm going to review it and test it, obviously. And also I'm going to test it in comparison to other controllers on the market. So we've got the old one, that's going to be a really good one to compare it with. I've also got what I think is called the Backman Easy controller. I'm not 100% sure what it's called, but you know the one, it's the standard Backman one. And then to compare it to something a bit more upmarket, I have of course got the HM2000 controllers over there, which I can also compare it with. So today it's just going to be empirical testing, right? So I'm not going to be opening these up to find out how they differ on the circuitry. If you'd be interested to know how they differ in terms of the circuitry and the design, the interior design, sounds cool, drop me a comment and we might do that at some point. But today it really is just going to be about the feel of the controller, how they work, how they perform, the slow speed, the power output, all that good stuff. So stay tuned, let's see what happens with this. It should be interesting. I've been looking forward to finding out what this is like for a while, so let's do it and let's hope it's worth it. It should be. Okay, so we've got the box, as I say, a really tiny compact package. It looks pretty great. What does it say on the front here? So high and low speed operation. Apparently there's a switch, so you can switch between high and low speed. As far as I know, that's a brand new feature for any Hornby controller. Fixed DC output for accessories. So again, that is something that the existing Hornby controller does not have. There's only one output, and it's the output from the control knob. So that's pretty cool. The back of the box is printed upside down, but it's just some warnings. You know, folks, I think I have a serious problem, don't I? I shouldn't be annoyed by things like that, but yeah, it does really get on my nerves, to be honest. I know it shouldn't, but it doesn't instill confidence, does it? But oh well, it's only a box. Come on then, let's see this. I've not had this out yet. Ooh. I say I've not had this out yet, but it looks like somebody has. It's all sort of mangled, but okay. All right. Okay, folks. First things first, this thing is clearly very nicely designed. It weighs noticeably more than the old one does. I'm going to say it does. Similar sort of size, the knob seems quite similar, but I was hoping that the knob would be slightly more satisfying to turn than the old one was, but no, it's still got that sort of cheap, nasty feel to it. I mean, this is the thing, right? It's not really that important, is it? But this knob might be, right? I know this is a strange conversation, but this is what connects you to your trains. And believe it or not, the way this feels makes a huge difference. I don't know about you, but my HM2000s feel great when you turn them. I haven't got a fetish or something, it's just an observation. It does matter, but yeah, it's just about the same. In fact, it's a bit worse than the old one. It's very sort of wibbly wobbly. The switch, that does feel good, that feels all right. Has it got an interlock? Yes, it has. So it's got that really annoying feature where you have to turn the controller back to 0 before you switch the switch, and you can't do it while the engine's on. Now, yeah, I know in theory that's a good idea. It stops you buggering your engines, but yeah, it's about agency, isn't it, really? I mean, the fact that you shouldn't do it doesn't mean that you should be prevented from doing it, if that makes sense. It's all about controlling your trains properly, and you should be able to rely on your own good sense so as not to damage your engines and things, but that's fair enough. It's only minor stuff. Okay, so what's inside the tissue? Big surprise. It is, of course, the power clip, so that's okay. Right, close-up time. Here we go, there's the back panel. So it does require the 19-volt DC power supply, which I've got loads of. As I say, I've got handfuls of those, but not cheap if you need to buy them, so that will be a surprise to some, I'm sure. In the middle then we've got the high and low switch, which will be very interesting. I'd love to know how that works and what the difference on the output actually is, but I assume the idea is if you've got fragile engines that you don't want to race along and derail because of the speed, you can set that to low and then the kids can really do what they want, because obviously kids love to turn these things up to full power. If you sneakily hit that onto the low, they can still do that and the models won't derail or even worse, burn out, so that's good. Then we have, of course, the uncontrolled terminals, and that's really nice. You've got a really nice connector. In fact, I wish this had one of those connectors on it as well. That would make it a lot more universal, wouldn't it? But no, that's got a nice connector. And I think, yeah, it's 14-volt DC. I think there's a fair bit of current as well. Yeah, I think it was 0.5 amp or something like that, which is interesting because these power supplies only put out 0.5 amp at 19 volts. So if that's putting 0.5 amp out at 14 volts, there ain't going to be a lot left for the controlling, so I don't know how that works really. But yeah, we're going to test this out. We're going to put this onto the track. I will get an engine, test it, and we are going to go through and test everything about this. So we're going to test the slow speed, we're going to test the power output, the ergonomics of it and everything in comparison to other controllers on the market. I'm going to do a full ranking and I'm going to basically try and tell you which one's best, in my, well, humble opinion, I suppose. Okay, let's give it a try then, shall we? Okay, so we are all set. I have the brand new controller all plugged in. I did find a 1 amp power supply for it, but the connector was different. It's from my DCC Select, so you can't use it. So I don't know why Hornby decided to use different connectors, but they did, so that's that. I've got the J50 set up onto the line and I have the speed mode set to high. Now, according to the instructions, and I didn't show you the instructions because I think there's probably a limit to what people will watch and find interesting, and I feel that this video is kind of near that mark. So I decided against sitting you through the instructions, but the instructions say that setting it to high is normal operation and setting it to low allows you to, as you know, just slow things down a bit and not do your logos in with too much power. So we're ready to try this. Now what we're looking for is nice, quiet and slow control. The problem with this old controller is that, yeah, the PWM on this was very, very aggressive, which I found did damage motors and things. It's not very nice on the motors, so I'm hoping they've done away with that. Have they or not? I don't know. Let's see. Right, I'm going to turn this up. Let's see how it goes. God. Ooh, that poor thing. That did not sound healthy. Yeah, that's some pretty aggressive PWM right there. Oh, God, I don't like doing that, actually. It's not good for the engine. Right, I'm going to get nice and close, just, well, hang on. Okay, here is the microphone so that you can hear this. I'm going to hold the microphone in roughly the same position for all of these tests so that you get a feel for the sound. Okay, ready? Just let that sink in. That noise, does that sound happy to you? Because it don't sound happy to me, folks. Oh, crikey, no. Right, I'm going to be honest here, I'm not going to do this much, because it's going to do it in. Right, let's just do a full speed drive-by, which again I fear for the motor doing, but we'll do it just so we can see the difference. So full speed ahead. Yeah, pretty quick. Now let's bring it back. And we'll do a full speed. Now I'm going to switch the switch to low and do full speed again. Is that very different? It doesn't seem very different. I literally cannot tell the difference. Can you? Right. Here's low. And here's high. It really is negligible. There's a very, very slight increase in speed. Okay, right. Let's try it with the old Hornby train set controller. Okay. Same test again then. I'm going to hold the mic where I held it before and we'll see what it sounds like. So here we go. Ooh, sounds a bit flatulent. I apologise, that wasn't me. Okay, so in some ways that sounds less unhealthy. But the sort of lower frequency noise it makes suggests that the frequency of the PWM, if this is not too complex, obviously, I apologise if it is a bit higher on the new controller. Whether that's any better for the motor or not, I don't know, but it certainly should allow for slower control. So the new controller sounds a lot more unhealthy, but I think ultimately it does allow for a better slow speed, so it's better in that sense. Okay, so that's that. Now let's try the Backman controller, see how that goes. Okay, so here is the Backman analog speed controller, but there is a problem. It's got this strange sort of proprietary track clip on it, which means I can't just plug it into my Hornby track, so I cut it off. And with scissors, yes, I could have used snips or something, but I thought it would be infinitely more satisfying to use scissors to get around it. So yes, I am using this with my Hornby track. I'm just going to use crocodile clips. That was satisfying. Right, let's see how this goes now. I don't believe this is a PWM controller, which means we shouldn't get that sort of high frequency hum from the engine. So let me get the mic, hang on. Okay, mic back into the same place then. Let's see what this one's like. This has got a nice satisfying click, by the way. When you click this on and start to turn it up, it just starts. There's no high frequency hum, which is worse, admittedly, for slow speeds. You don't really want that for slow speed operation because it just sort of kicks in and you haven't got much controllability. Although having said that, that's not bad. That's about as good as the other two, except it's a little bit quieter. But yeah, this Backman Easy controller is a bit nicer, I have to say. Yes, it hasn't got the PWM, so you can't do the controllability at the slow speeds, but it is better for the motors, I'm sure it is. Let's try that once more. Yep, that's my favourite so far, folks. I'll try to be quiet for a second so that you can still hear it. And you can flip the direction switch. Watch this. And there's a dead zone in the middle. like that, so it, you know, it does stop and you can use that dead zone. Then you flick it over to the other side and it starts again at the same speed. You haven't got to wind it right down to 0, then change direction and then start it up again. It's a minor thing, but again, it's workflow, isn't it? It's extra steps that you have to take. So far, that's my favourite, and it's by far the better quality one. It's a bit light, but the actual control. Listen to that snap. In fact, I bet that's annoying if you've got headphones on. But yeah, that snap makes a big difference to me, and just the slight resistance to this as you turn it is very, very nice indeed. However, it doesn't have the extra features of the new Hornby controller. It doesn't have the DC output, and I don't think it's got the capacitor discharge unit either. So this is the better for controlling engines. So far, that's the best. However, we haven't tried this thing yet, which is my personal choice. Okay, final test then with the HM2000 this time. Now, this is not a PWM controller as far as I'm aware. I think this is a straight DC controller, although this does use an element of feedback, which just basically means on sort of gradients, and I think at the slow speeds as well, it can sort of adjust its output to keep controllability of the loco. I think in basic layman's terms, that's roughly speaking how it works. It does also have the uncontrolled AC and DC on this one, which is very good. So yeah, this is packed with features, but of course it's very, very expensive. We'll talk about price in a moment. That's going to be a separate category. But right now we're still working on performance. So let's give this a test. Again, this is the uncontrolled. This is one with no engine on, although there is an engine somewhere else. This has got quite a nice feel to it. It's very, very ergonomic, and again, you have got that satisfying click. Again, a minor feature. It's not absolutely essential, but it does make the controlling of your trains that little bit more pleasurable, I find, unless that's just me being weird. Okay, so test the performance, get the mic in the same place very roughly, and here we go. So click, you'll have heard that click many times, and then try and get a slow speed out of it. And as you can see, ooh, it wants to go. Almost. There we go. And as you can see, that is just as good as the high frequency whine version of this we get when we use the new Hornby controller. But of course it is a lot more expensive, so you would expect it to be a lot better. So, yes, that's it. I think you can make your own minds up on that, can't you? Let me put the mic back on. Okay, so yes, I think this does give pretty good performance. However, that sort of PWM thrashing of the motor is not something that I've ever liked. If you think of this as sending out spikes of sort of high voltage into the motor at high frequencies, that's basically what it does. And yeah, I don't like what that does to motors, to be honest with you. So I'm not a fan personally. I prefer the non-PWM controllers. Although I'm sure other people will say hogwash, there's nothing wrong with them, whatever. But yeah, for me personally, I don't like that an awful lot. So let's put these into my table that I've drawn then and see how they do against each other on the performance. Okay, so here we are. So I'm just working on a traffic light system here. So as you can see, I've given the new Hornby controller, which is R7229, amber. Yes, the control itself is very good. I do like the feature of the high and low speed, although that will come under features later on, as you can see. But the PWM does mean that the motors just don't sound happy when you use this controller. And the same is basically true for R8250. That's the old version of this controller. Once again, quite harsh, quite offensive to the motors really, and so I've given it an amber. The Backman DC analog controller is much better. True, it's not quite as controllable at the lower speeds, but it doesn't seem to thrash the motors quite so much. And the same thing goes with the HM2000, which I think is the best of them all. It's going to be, isn't it, for the price? But unfortunately, yes, it seems you can't beat that with a low price alternative on price. Okay, let's talk about design then. Okay, so design then. Now, some of you are going to say, probably in the comments, that the design is mostly trivial and the way these feel and the way these look really doesn't have any effect on the way that they perform. And yes, that is true to an extent. However, I disagree with that because these controllers are what go between you and your model railway. And I think the way these feel and how nice these are to use does have a direct impact on how much you enjoy driving your model trains. And so I think this is pretty important. If it feels cheap and nasty, then it's not going to be that enjoyable. So I think this is quite important, so that's why I'm going to talk about it. So let's start on the left-hand side then with the brand new Hornby controller. Now, admittedly, there is a lot of weight to it, so it feels quite nice and sturdy in the hand. It's just, yeah, it just feels better. This one is light as a feather. This one is silly how light it is. So this one is much better on, well, in that regard. However, the control knob is the worst of the whole lot. It's really, really flimsy. You can hear it. There's absolutely no resistance at all. There's sort of no thought to ergonomics whatsoever. The direction switch is okay, that feels all right. It is a little bit sort of wobbly and cheap and nasty. And of course, the worst part about it is the fact that you can't change the direction while the controller is not set to 0, even at the very lowest speeds. So again, that is quite annoying and frustrating. And once again, I've spoken to quite a few kids about this who really don't like that feature. So it's not very nice to use. It's no better to use really than this one. Let's get on to this one then. I mean, it's not so cool looking. I must say this one looks pretty cool. Nice round edges, nice modern design. This one doesn't quite look as good. Again, it's a few years old now, so that's probably it. Well, I would say actually that this one is worse. Yeah, the control knob doesn't feel so bad on this one. There is a bit too much resistance on this one, though. It feels like something's catching or something like that. Not great. Same thing again with the direction switch. It feels more or less the same, I would say. Perhaps slightly better than the new one, but yeah, not a lot different. Of course, the lightweight makes it really suck. The thing about these two as well is there's no rubber grips on them, so they do slide around. They have got these sort of extrusions here on the bottom, but they're not rubber, so if you pull on the wires, they float around. Which brings us on to my favourite so far. This is the Backman Controller, of course. This is much nicer. So the weight is okay. It's about the same as the new Hornby controller in weight, I would say very roughly, but the control knob is vastly better. It's a really nice knob to handle. And I know that sounded awful. Just please nobody do anything with that. Have your little laugh and then forget about it, please. The direction switch is quite nice. It switches nice and easily. It doesn't rattle around like these two do. And yeah, it's just a nice decisive click left and right. And look, you can turn it up and you can still change direction when you're on the top. Yes, you shouldn't do it, but the fact that you can is quite nice. I also quite like the way that this is modular, so you can pull out all of the cables and it is just a box on its own. It's nice and tidy, and of course you can put your own, yeah, it uses an audio jack on the back, so you can put your own cables in there and use whatever you like. You're not just stuck with these, and there's no socket, so if you pull them out by accident, that's it, that's ruined. Underneath you have got rubber grips, so this stays where you put it, and in fact, look, I can barely push this along on the carpet. If I give this a push, these move. So that is just a much, much nicer design, I think. It's got grills to keep it cool, not that it really needs them. Quite an old-fashioned design. It looks like it's from the 90s, so it doesn't look as cool as these do, but it's by far the nicest to use. This one on the end is of course far more expensive than the rest, and we will come on to price in just a second. But once again, it's very nice to use. It's got an awful lot of weight because there's a big transformer inside here, I think. So it's got loads of weight. It's not quite such a nice design. There's sharp edges and things, but I think it's supposed to look quite sharp, isn't it? So that's all right. We'll forgive it that. Looks reasonably futuristic, looks like a train controller, I would say. None of these look like a train controller particularly. I think you would guess if you were an alien that this was for controlling model trains. Maybe that's a bit problematic. Anyway, let's talk about the important stuff. So the control knob is pretty nice. There's a decisive click, just like the Backman one. I love those clicks. A bit of resistance, not too much, feels just very nice. The switches on this, though, are not very nice. Yeah. Can you hear that? They rattle quite horribly, so that's quite annoying. However, they are durable. I must say I use these on a more or less daily basis, and I have done for about 5 years, and they're absolutely fine, so that's pretty good. And of course, you've got a bit of feedback as well. You've got the LEDs, which show you when your trains are running. So there we go. That is a bit about the design of all of these. I'm going to give the two cheap Hornby ones are red. Yeah, both of them not very nice. This one is very slightly better, but it's still horrible to use. This Backman one gets a green. That's absolutely lovely to use. And this one's going to get an amber because, yeah, the design isn't quite as nice. It's not quite as nice to use as the Backman one. However, it is a very lovely design, and I must say I enjoy using it. So that's the design. Now let's talk a little bit about the various features. I suppose this is arguably one of the most important parts. So features then, let's talk about the brand new Hornby controller first. So this does have an awful lot more features than the previous Hornby train set controller. However, those features don't really concern the actual controlling of the loco. It's still more or less just a speed control and a direction switch. However, the high and low switch is probably the cleverest feature of this controller. It's probably my favourite feature. It's the only feature that I would say is a very, very clever idea and that most controllers should have them. So that is very innovative. I like that. The other thing is, of course, accessories. If you're someone who wants to use accessories, if you've got automatic points to change, or not automatic, but electrified points, signals, that sort of thing, this has got the capacitor discharge unit inside, and it has also got the 14 volt uncontrolled DC output there, which is pretty good. So if you like your accessories, or if you're thinking about getting into some electrical accessories, then this is a great option. It's not massively powerful. As I say, I think I've only read 500 milliamps is the output, but that's all right for LEDs, and it should be okay for, the odd point motor switch. Nothing like that on this one, as I've already said. So if you wanted to use accessories with this one here, well, tough, you can't. So that's a good thing. Apart from that, yeah, the features end there, I would say. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Obviously the feature that I've already talked about of this annoying left and right control switch. I think I've already spoken about enough, so I'm not going to repeat that. But otherwise, it's okay. Yes, it has got a fair few nice features. In fact, I'm probably going to give that an amber on features, but there is another feature to talk about, which we'll get to in a second. Okay, well, you can guess what I'm going to say about this one. What features is probably what I'm going to say. It's a very basic controller. To be honest with you, the new controller from Hornby isn't much of an improvement if all you want to do is play with your trains. Yeah, they both sound pretty unhealthy, to be honest, on the motors, and I would recommend using almost anything else if you want your engines to last very long. No features whatsoever, really, apart from just controlling trains. Yes, very, very light on features. The Backman controller is also fairly light on features. This does very little. In fact, it does very little else than the rubbish Hornby controller I've just showed you. Yes, it's not particularly feature-packed. However, you would argue, does it need to be? I suppose if it had the high and low option on it, it would be a lot better. And if it did some accessories and things, that would be good as well. The other thing is the power inputs. This came with a 1000 milliamp transformer, which is 1 amp obviously, and so that makes this the most powerful so far. The other two only required half an amp, 0.5 amps, 500 milliamps, which does mean one engine, maybe two if you're lucky. This one could do 3 or 4 if it's able to put out a full amp, and we should think it would. But that's that. And then, of course, the HM2000, which is by far the most feature-packed of them all. So it's got your normal controls, obviously. Obviously, though, 2 of them. It is more than double the price, so you sort of want to. But if you want to control more than one engine at a time, or rather one loop of track at a time, then this is the best one for that. But obviously, the features on the back are the interesting part, so look at all the features. So you've got 2 separate outputs, obviously, because you've got 2 separate controllers. You've then got an uncontrolled DC and an uncontrolled AC, and then some spare ones, I think, which might be for the additional units that you can plug onto the side. So you've got what looks like so you can plug in a monitor. It is a sort of serial port, I believe. So yeah, it's expandable as well. This is by far the most feature-packed controller, I would say, although obviously it is by far the most expensive. So there we go. Now, let's get these all back in, because there is one feature that I've not talked about, and it's the killer of all features. And anybody that uses and owns one of these will know exactly about this feature. And that feature is short circuit protection. What happens if there's a short circuit? What happens if an engine derails or a motor fails or something goes wrong so that the output is shorted? Well, let's find out. Let's start, shall we, with the old Hornby controller, and you all know what these buggers do. So the moment you short circuit these, there is not a single milliamp, not a single coulomb passes out of it. It dies straight away. And the really annoying, horrible thing is, as soon as it does that, you can't do anything. You can unplug it, you can fiddle with the dial, you cannot use your trains for a seemingly random amount of time. You just have to wait for it to reset. And a lot of kids know this too, by the way. I get loads of comments about these saying how much they hate having to wait for these things to reset. It's an absolute nightmare. So that one can go out of shot, actually. I can't bear to look at it for that. The bane of my life for many years before I got this. Okay, so let's try the Backman one then. Let's see what happens when you short circuit that. So I've just turned it up to full there and I've shorted them together. Interestingly, no short circuit protection at all on this. It does pass full current, as you can see. So about 700 milliamps, about 0.7 amps, and it does that indefinitely. It keeps passing that current. So the bad news is no short circuit protection. It is going to pass that current through your loco if it can. The good news is that isn't a huge amount of current, so it's not going to do any serious damage. And by the way, none of these are going to burn your house down no matter what you do with them. But yeah, I would have said 700 milliamps isn't enough to do any serious damage, but perhaps it's a bit worrisome that it doesn't have some sort of short circuit protection. So that's not great either. Once again, the HM2000 is by far the most entertaining, shall we say, when we short circuit it. So just watch this. So I put the two terminals together like this, and it puts out an incredible amount of current. As you can see, about 5 amps. That is pretty crazy. And these are only rated for 500 milliamps, so it puts out some 10 times its rated current. And it does that for a little while. In fact, I was amazed that it did this. It's quite, I would say, borderline dangerous, that. However, it does seem to detect that there's something wrong after an unreasonable amount of time, and it does then drop the current right down. And once it does that, it goes pretty safe. The current drops to almost nothing, and all you do is then you turn the controller off, turn it back on again, and it then works normally. Yeah, the LEDs sort of flicker and go dim though, so I don't really know if it's working properly. I don't know if it's supposed to do that. I don't know whether it's actually damaging it, is what I'm saying. But it is reasonably safe, and after a bit of a short circuit time, it does seem to go off. It does seem to cut the current down, and the good news is there's no need to wait for it to reset. You just turn it back off, clear the short circuit, and it works normally. There's no messing about. Okay, so the big question on everybody's lips. How does John here, I don't know what to call him, he deserves a silly name though, how does this one react to a short circuit? Will Hornby have listened to their customers and fixed the old problem? Well, no. Obviously not. Okay folks, we're going to test this one live. Please have a smarter system, please. Right, turning it up. Short circuiting now. Okay, you know what folks, it's done the same thing as the old one, I'm pretty sure. Let's turn it down, turn it back up again. So Hornby knows how annoying this feature is. It's just kind of frustrating to see them do the same thing again. Surely there is a way to have these things cut out temporarily, and as soon as the short circuit has been corrected, the controller will work again, surely. Or even a reset button, perhaps, so that you can reset it yourself. No, it has done the exact same thing. Hornby have made the same mistake again. I mean, there's no... I'm kind of lost for words here. There's no way to be more out of touch with your customers, is there? This is the one thing that every kid I ever talk to about model trains hates, and it's still here on the new controller. Hornby, why do you like shooting yourself in the foot like this? Right, let's move on. I can't be doing with this anymore. Alright, so hopefully then that was enough to give you a bit of an idea of the different features of these. So let's give them all a little bit of a rating if we can. So, the new Hornby controller, yes, it's actually got quite a few nice features that the previous controller didn't, namely the high and low speed and the DC output. However, it's still got the very annoying, very infuriating, in fact, short circuit protection, and it's still got the really annoying left and right interlock, which stops you from changing direction when the train's moving. So that's an amber. It is an improvement on the old one, but it's still pretty annoying to use. The old Hornby controller is basically useless. All it can do is allow you to control trains, and of course if you draw a bit too much current through it for any amount of time, it will just cut out dead for an indefinite amount of time, and you'll have to go and do something else until it decides to reset. Neither of these have a reset button, which is a massive letdown. So these, well, that one's going to get an amber, that one's going to get a red. This one's going to get a red as well because it doesn't have any short circuit protection. Not to the point where it's dangerous, but it's a bit of a shame about that. And apart from that, there's no accessory output with it. So yes, it's not got much going for it, has it? But it is all right, it's usable. And then the HM2000, I do love this thing actually. It's got an awful lot of features, and it's also very entertaining when you short it out. It gives you a little show when you first do it, because 5 amps from a rate of a 500 milliamp rated device is quite a scary experience, and for that it gets full marks. But more seriously, yeah, it's got everything you'd want. It's got proper short circuit protection on it. It's got all of the accessory controls, AC and DC, and a reasonable power output as well. And at 5 amps, that is pretty unbelievable. So there we go. The HM2000 wins it all really with green. So that's that. Okay, one thing I haven't talked about though is price. Now, I'm going to tell you now, I'm not going to mess about pretending that this is cheaper than it really is. I'm going to be talking about the prices of these, and in that price I'm going to include the power supply. So I will be adding the £22 to this, and also to this if they don't come as standard. So let's talk about price and evaluate that some, shall we? Okay, so price is quite a pleasant surprise, I would say. You might be quite pleased about this because there is a very clear winner. And the clear winner, of course, is this. Now, this is the Backman Controller, and it is by far the cheapest, but it's not by far the worst. So Hattons have these for £27, and that does include the transformer, which is everything you need to get started. Now, I will admit, I'm going to give this the slight benefit of the doubt because I don't know what the Backman price for this is. I can't find the price for that, unfortunately. So the RRP may have been a little bit higher, but even so, it's quite reasonable, I would say. Then the next cheapest is this. The cheapest I can find this for is on Hattons for £27 it was. And once again, benefit of the doubt there because I don't know what the Hornby price was. But for £27 you get this X set from Hattons, and that does include the transformer too. So again, you know, you don't want to be really buying these at all. Don't buy one, that's what I would say. Unless you're insane, I wouldn't recommend it. Then of course the next cheapest is this. Now I think you can get this a bit cheaper at Hattons, so you can knock a fiver off if you want to, if you're being very generous. The price I came up with for that is £37.98, and that's assuming you buy the controller and the transformer separately. To be honest with you, not a great deal of difference between these two, and this one is more expensive, but I suppose it's also got more features, so yeah, I guess that's worth it. And then finally, the HM2000 is by far the most expensive at £117. However, do bear in mind, for that you do get all the extra features, you get all the extra quality, you get all the extra power output, and of course you get the extra controller. So you get 2 controls with that. So, conclusion time, I think. Well, let me just show you the table as it stands, and I'll show you the overall grades. And of course the scores are in as well for you there, so you can see the winner is the HM2000, and in fact the Backman Controller there, just the same. The next worst is the new Hornby Controller, and the very worst at only 3.8 out of 10 is the old-fashioned Hornby Controller. So hopefully that is thorough enough for you. I've basically gone into everything I can think about as far as controllers go. Basically, in my opinion, the conclusion is forget about those two. They do have their pros and cons, but essentially they're just rubbish, aren't they? Let's not forget that. I'm sorry to say that. I was hoping the new Hornby one would be better, but it frankly isn't. It's just the same rubbish with a couple of extra sort of half-baked features thrown in, but essentially still no real good for controlling trains. So if money's no object, then the HM2000 is my recommendation, especially if you want to use accessories. If you don't care about accessories and you only want to control one track and you're on a bit of a budget, then the Backman Controller is definitely the one to go. If neither of these appeal to you, then check out Gagemaster. I think that's basically it really. Gagemaster controllers, any of those are pretty good from what I've heard. I can't show you one of those because I haven't got one, unfortunately. But yeah, these two are the ones to go. If you want your motors to last a long while, if you want to have decent slow speed control and just good quality, then can't beat these two really. Forget the cheap Hornby ones, let's be honest. It's just not good for your motors, I think. Could be wrong about that, it's just my opinion, but that's what I think. Okay, well, thank you very much for watching, folks. I hope that was interesting for you. Quite some controversial opinions have been expressed in this video, so if you disagree with any of those, that is absolutely fine, but do let me know because I'd like to stay in touch with you guys, unlike certain companies. So that I can understand what you guys like and what you guys think, so I can try and gauge these videos to, yes, to be agreeable by all. Let's put it that way. Okay, well, thanks for your time, folks. Let me know what you think, as I say, and I will see you next time. All right, cheers, everybody.